Hey y'all, so in today's video, I'm going to be sharing 5 little known facts about nonprofit boards. Y'all ready to talk about it? Let's get into it. Hey, it's Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help new and small nonprofits get up and running. If you need help with your nonprofit, why aren't you subscribed to my channel yet? I'm dropping videos every week, okay? So today we're going to talk about some little known facts about boards. And maybe when I said this or when I titled it, I should have said 5 facts you should know, but you probably don't know. Maybe that's a better way to put it, because a lot of people who start nonprofits really don't understand the role of the board of directors. And if you don't understand those key positions, then you may run into issues later on down the line. So first things first, I've done a couple of videos on this. So I'm linking a video that talks about the board of directors above so you can learn more. And also below, I'm linking my board's masterclass. So I did a masterclass and I recorded it so you can understand the role of the boards and you can share this information with your own board of directors. Also, I want you to wait to the end of the video because I'm going to share my one piece of advice that I would give if you are recruiting for board members for your nonprofit. This is the one thing that I would do above anything else. The first fact that I want to talk about is there are 3 duties that are ascribed to board members that they should know by heart. It's the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. And so I broke those down in detail in the video that I mentioned before. But in general, what I want you to understand is that the board of directors is not there to serve the founder's wishes. And you're listening to this, and I know you're mad at me already because you're like, here you go, Tiffany. Here you go talking about the boards having power over a nonprofit founder. It's not about power. It's just about understanding how things work in a nonprofit. So the board is the governing body, and they as a collective body have to make decisions that serve the interest of the organization, not the founder. So there may come a time where the founder wants to move in a direction or a founder wants to make a certain decision and the board is not in agreement with that. And if it's agreed that whatever decision you make is in the best interest of the organization, then that's the way that board members are legally bound to move. That's the direction that they should go. So I know you think, okay, I started this organization, it's my vision, they should adhere to my wishes because it's my organization. But you have to understand that legally it is not your organization. And so board members may be there and may want to honor your wishes and may have some sense of loyalty, but their sense of loyalty has to be towards the organization first, okay? So I just really need you to understand that. And if that's confusing to you, I've also linked some information from some websites that may be helpful so you can read more about the responsibilities of board members. So with the second fact, I alluded to it a little bit, but board members are legally and ethically responsible for the organization. So that means that decisions that the organization makes, it all stops at the board, right? They are the ones that are held accountable for decisions. So they need to be aware of why your organization is making a certain decision, how you came to that decision, and making sure certain things are documented. It's not just a responsibility of the founder. It's not just a responsibility of people in certain positions. If you are serving on a board and your organization is not meeting its deadlines or not adhering to regulations, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to know? That's your responsibility as a board member to know certain things. So first things first, if your organization is not submitting its 990 tax form, you should be aware of that. Every single board member should know the deadline for the 990 tax form, and they should know and actually should look at it before it's submitted. So things like that, there are certain things that you as a board member must know because you're legally responsible for the decisions that the organization makes, and you're responsible to make sure that the organization adheres to all the regulations put in place by the state and put in place by the IRS. The same thing goes with being ethically responsible. You want to make decisions that align with the values of the organization, and there are certain decisions that you all should be making together, right? They shouldn't be made without the notice of the board. So one example may be accepting a large donation from a corporation, right? Maybe it's not ethically sound, or maybe it's not aligning with what you said you all are about. You should have a process in place where you all review that together and make decisions together. So you can't be a passive board member. And I know there are some passive board members out there. What I'm saying is, if you knew as a board member how much you're responsible for the organization you're serving, you wouldn't want to be passive. You wouldn't want to miss meetings, right? So you have to be active and aware of what your responsibilities are as a board member. The third one is that board members are responsible for fundraising. And if you're a board member watching this, you probably don't want to hear this either. You probably are like, I don't like asking for money. Why should that be my responsibility? Why not leave it to someone else who's actually good at fundraising? Why do I have to do it? Well, this is why. So as a board member, you are responsible for making sure that the organization is financially healthy. And as a nonprofit, it's a given that you have to fundraise. You can't just rely on grants, or you can't just rely on the development person or the development staff person to do everything. You have to play your part when it comes to serving on a board. Now, I always say this. Asking for money is only one small part of fundraising. There are so many different aspects of fundraising, from before the ask and after the ask, that board members can participate in. So when you hear me say board members are responsible for fundraising, I'm not necessarily saying that they have to be the ones that are asking people directly for money. But I always say this, I always follow it up with this. If you are a new nonprofit, your board members have to get comfortable with directly asking, because you need to be able to tap into their networks to get your startup funds. That is the best place to start. And your board members have to be comfortable talking about the organization, advocating for the organization, and saying we need funds to do this work and to do it well and to serve our community. So yes, as a board member for an established organization, you don't necessarily have to be involved in the ask, but I highly recommend, if you're super new and you're in the startup phase, you want your board members to get comfortable with asking, because you're going to need that startup funding. Number 4 is that your nonprofit board is really governed by state law, not so much IRS, a little bit by the IRS, but more so by the state. So sometimes I get questions around like, how many board members am I supposed to have? Or how long are board members allowed to serve? And you would think that that's a question for the IRS in particular, but not necessarily. When it comes to your nonprofit corporation, you need to check state law, because state law will more than likely have something to say about how your board is to be governed. So generally, states have nonprofit code in place, and you need to refer to that code when you're developing your bylaws and when you're making decisions about how your board is supposed to govern itself. So state law will have a minimum number of board members. State law will talk about term limits. State law may even talk about certain policies you need to have on your board, like a whistleblower policy. So you always need to refer to your state law when you're developing your nonprofit board, because you don't really want to go against state law, right? And you also just want to make sure that you're meeting all of the standards that the state has set forth. That's why I always say, when you're developing your bylaws, you don't want to just take any kind of template that you find on the internet, because certain states have requirements for what you put in your bylaws and the exact language you need to put in your bylaws. And so if you're taking a template from a different state, you may not be meeting your state standards. So that's why I always say, if you're going to use a bylaws template, then you need to use a template from an organization that is governed by your particular state. And then also, it always makes sense for a lawyer to review. It always makes sense for a professional to review those bylaws, just to make sure you're adhering to state law. And the last fact, which is a kind of funny one, but I had to throw this in here, and it's the best one of all: board members actually are supposed to do work. Now, look, there may be some people who serve on boards because they want to look good in some way, maybe on their resume or on their LinkedIn profile, and have no intention of doing any work. Or maybe you have like a celebrity or someone who's pretty high profile in your area, and they're like, oh, I'm just here to help you with my name. I'm not trying to do any work. But in normal circumstances, board members are supposed to work. Now, the nature of that work depends on what phase of development you are in for your nonprofit. And this is important, because when you're a new nonprofit, you're not necessarily just a governing board. You're not necessarily just a board that provides oversight of what you do. You actually are what's called a working board in most circumstances. You're actually doing some of the programming. You're doing some of the direct work with clients because you're not in a space where you can hire yet, or maybe you're all volunteer. And that's normal. A lot of people don't necessarily talk about working boards, but that's what you have to do in the startup phase. Your board may look different once you're 10 years in and you can hire staff, or you've moved from volunteers to paid staff and you don't have to do that anymore. So then you function as normal boards do, as governing boards. They don't get involved in the day-to-day operations. They let the staff handle it, and the chief executive officer oversee all of that. Okay, so there are key differences depending on what phase you're in, but whatever type of work you do, you should be working. You should come to your meetings prepared, having done all your pre-work or all your homework. You should know what your expectations are. You should not wait for anyone to tell you, right? It's good practice for your governance committee to put together materials and welcome packets so people understand the organization's current standing. But you as a board member, look, you have to be prepared. You have to be proactive because, like I said before, you're legally responsible. Your name is going on paperwork. Your name is going on paperwork to the IRS. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure you're adding some value to the nonprofit. So if people tell you, well, nonprofit boards don't work, yeah, that may be what happens, right? But that doesn't make it right. The fact is, nonprofit board members are supposed to do work. They're supposed to contribute. They're supposed to help. They're supposed to add value. So if you find yourself struggling and your board is not really doing the work or pulling their weight, then it may be time to move on and to find new board members. I promised that I would share my #1 tip for recruiting board members, and also if you need help with the recruitment process for your boards, I have a board recruitment toolbox which provides resources to help you recruit. It provides a sample board contract and a sample welcome packet and a matrix that you can use to recruit board members. So if you need those kind of resources, check out the description box below because my toolbox is linked below. So this is my #1 tip when you're finding board members. Always start with the qualities and the perspectives and the background that you want first. Don't just start looking for random people. Write down what you need at the table, right? Write down, do an inventory of what you have in terms of skill sets, perspectives, personalities, and then ask yourself what's missing. And then you recruit for what's missing. That will give you a guide for who to find because you're not just recruiting random people. As I always say, it's a privilege to serve on your board. So you need to treat that process like it's a privilege. So you need to be targeted about your recruitment. Obviously, you can put out general requests and say, hey, we're looking for board members. But alongside that, you do need to do some targeted work based on the personalities, the qualities, background, perspectives that you're looking for your nonprofit. Was that helpful? I hope it was. Thank you so much for watching. If you need help with your nonprofit, make sure you visit me at www.bossinabudget.com. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.